But right now, we're going to move over to the Murphy Show hotline and move our attention over to state politics. Speaker of the House Cameron Sexton made some news last Friday when he was on our show, declaring that he believed that had the Senate the same attitude as the House of Representatives in the special session, that more could have been done to repair some of the perceptions of loopholes or actual loopholes involving Tennessee law when it comes to keeping individuals behind bars and incarcerated, saying that he had had conversations with District Attorney Glenn Funk about these very types of matters that seem to have led to the death of Jillian Ludwig. We have since had Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson on the show. Yesterday, Jack declared that he did not believe that he saw any legislation that would have prevented Shaquille Taylor from being out of jail. And I wanted Cameron Sexton the opportunity to respond, and obviously he's always gracious with his time. Cameron joins us now on the Murphy Show hotline. Cameron, thank you for the time. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much.
So there seems to be somewhat of a disagreement with regard to what could or could not have been accomplished in the special session. Without leading you in any direction, I mean, you made the statement last Friday on our show, and it was pretty declaratory. And I'll tell you what, I've got the clip. I want to play this for everyone just to make sure that I'm not mischaracterizing your words from last Friday. Here's what you said last Friday, Cameron. But I just want to make sure that I heard you correctly, that you feel like if the Senate had brought the same attitude with them to the special session, that you could have gotten some laws passed during the special session that would have prevented this individual from being able to get out of jail.
Yes, we could have. And the frustration is what it is we were told your ideas are too complex. They're going to take too much time, or this is the governor's special call session. There's really nothing that we can do. We're only going to do what he wants to do, or there's nothing extraordinary here, or all this can wait till January.
All right, so that's you this past Friday. Do you stand by that, Cameron?
Yeah, I mean, I think Senator Johnson kind of reiterated the same points that I said the Senate told us to you on the air, so I think that would be accurate, yes.
And you're referencing, when you talk about the legislation that potentially could have been utilized to prevent Shaquille Taylor from getting out of jail, the alleged shooter of Jillian Ludwig, you're talking about 7036, is that right?
It was, yes, it's the bill dealing with involuntary commitment. The caption was broad enough to cover the Chapter 6 part in Title 33, I believe, on the involuntary commitment. It would also cover Chapter 5, which you needed to be able to mirror that sections together. And so we were having conversations over the weekend. And so we filed the bill initially based off the initial conversations that we had. There was ongoing conversations. We're still working on it. As you know, Matt, during the legislative, and I think Cameron's on here as he knows, you continue working on the bills all the way up until both the houses or both the House and the Senate both pass it. And sometimes there's changes, and everybody, that's expected. It's never done until it's voted on by both sides. And so, you know, we had the bill, we had met, even my sheriff had talked to me about this issue of involuntary commitment, about people being a danger to society. And there was nothing that he could do to get them the help or get them off the streets. And so, it was an issue prior, and it's still an issue today. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it through special session. And, you know, Matt, look, I understand the Senate. I didn't think the Senate's going to come out and say, yes, that bill is going to make a difference. I don't think they would have done that. We have a difference in opinion, but unfortunately in this case, there's no way to see who was right and who's wrong because the bill never passed. And so,
well, but the bill, but I would note, and I don't mean to interrupt you here, Cameron, but I would note the bill never passed the House either.
No, well, it made it through the committee process, and it got to the House floor. And so we had it on the House floor at the end of special session. We rolled it to the next week to continue to work on it. And as you recall, the special session was 2 weeks. And then we come back in the beginning of the week, and we start having conversations again with the Senate. And even the governor was trying. And we had conversations, and they continued to tell us that they were only going to pass a certain number of bills. These were the 3 or 4 bills that they were going to pass. They were doing nothing else, which is fine. That's their prerogative. But also, I mean, Matt, you can go back and look, and all the bills, they didn't hear the bill in their committee. They tabled all the bills for the most part, except the 3 of the governors in committee, never heard them, never discussed them, never debated them. And so it's complex, which is their right. I'm not complaining that they couldn't do it. That's just what they did. But at the end of the day, we're still working on it. We still had it was actually on the House floor to get there. But the Senate didn't want to take it up, and so there you go.
Well, Cameron, forgive me. I'm not trying to be intentionally obtuse. It didn't pass the House. If it was such an important bill and you recognized it at the time that it was such an important bill, why didn't it pass the House?
Well, we passed all of the bills on Thursday, Friday. We're still working on it, still trying to get it right. And when the Senate, we could have passed it, and it would have been bipartisan. It came out of committee bipartisan. And the Senate still wouldn't have taken it up. So whether it passed on the House floor or not, it was on the House floor.
But you didn't.
And if the Senate,
but you didn't. But last Friday, hold on, Cameron. Last Friday, you laid blame squarely in the laps of the Tennessee Senate, and now it seems as though shared blame ought to be on the House. You didn't pass 70-36 either.
We had it to the House floor. We were working on a mandatory language when the Senate told us they were not going to take up any legislation.
Very good.
So, Matt, we could have passed it, but at the end of the day, it still wouldn't have become law.
Okay. So I've got a question. This is Cameron Smith. A quick question here from a leadership standpoint. How often are you getting together with Senator Johnson on stuff like this and saying, okay, look, let's kind of figure out what's in the realm of the possible here. Let's come up with a game plan so we don't, have Republicans pointing fingers at other Republicans about who should have moved this or that, and just say, hey, let's get on the same page. Let's work with the governor, the Senate, the House, and get this. Is that happening? Because from an outsider standpoint, it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty and we're just kind of moving pieces around. Am I missing something here?
No, I think there is working together. The Senate as a whole was not unwilling to pass legislation. Jack was talking to Leader Lamberth and to us, and we were having meetings, and Lieutenant Governor as well, and Speaker Pro Tem Farrell Hell, and a bunch of other senators, Brent Taylor from Memphis, all wanted to do more than what the Senate was willing to do, and they were wanting to do bills and pass legislation. We're having conversations, and we thought we had movement from the Senate and that they were wanting to take up and do more than just a couple of bills that the governor wanted to do. And so we're working towards that goal. And we get to a point where a few of the senators, and they had a meeting, and they decided that they didn't want to do anything more than the three senators. It wasn't the Senate as a whole until the very end where they decided that decision. There were individuals in the Senate who we talked to who wanted to do more. But at the end, the Senate decided that as a body that they didn't want to.
Tell me, and I expect that 70-36, it will be called something different, I guess, during the general session, but I expect that it's coming back up, no doubt. Tell me how it would help, just reiterate, and I know we discussed this last Friday, Cameron, how it would help alleviate this loophole, if that's what you would call it. I know some take exception with that type of language, but bridge the gap between someone being incompetent enough that they cannot stand trial versus an inability to get them in a psychiatric facility, such as we saw with Shaquille Taylor.
Yeah, so I think you were right. The incompetent stand trial and the involuntary commitment are two totally different issues. One is criminal, one is civil, and so they're two totally different issues. You were correct on that yesterday. What I will say is currently when you talk to law enforcement or you talk to DAs and they talk about the involuntary commitment statute that we have, currently it says you have to be an immediate risk to yourself and to society and be a substantial risk. So the first part is about the immediate, and we worked with law enforcement, worked with others, and came up with imminent in that bill, which would have helped to a certain degree, which would have made it to where using the word immediate means today. So when you're talking to law enforcement and the Judicial Committee, immediate means right now. And so that's why the current involuntary commitment is used primarily for people who are suicidal, because they're an immediate threat to themselves. That means now. That doesn't mean tomorrow. That doesn't mean a week from now. That's an immediate threat, which they interpret to mean now. Moving it to imminent means at some point in the future. It doesn't mean like 6 months from now, but here at some point in the future, they are imminent threat to themselves or to society as a whole. The other thing that we're working on over the weekend is the word substantial. And so working on words, whether to remove the word substantial could work. The question was, does that make it too wide? Do we need to change it to another word? And so what we're trying to do is take an issue that, yes, was complex, but that we had heard from law enforcement as being something that was needed, and working towards a solution to give law enforcement the tools to take someone who is dangerous to society and be able to have them involuntary committed to do a mental evaluation, which in the end, with the secondary amendatory language, would have potentially got us, which I think it would have gotten us to the point where this individual, when they committed that crime in September, you have a new law, you have a new change, you have a new definition, and it would have given the ability for law enforcement, for General Funk, to go back in and ask for that person to be involuntary committed, because the ruling based in May was under a different definition, not the definition that would have passed.
Do you believe D.A. Funk is doing everything in his power to keep these individuals incarcerated, or do we also have somewhat of a DA problem in Davidson County?
No, look, I think he's doing everything he can to put people behind bars. And just like when he was talking about the misdemeanor bill, now it had a different effective date than the other one that I just talked about, but he was talking about what that means to the court systems and why it was important to have mandatory mental health evaluations for individuals who are creating misdemeanors. And so he's doing all he can. The issue is when you have someone who you know is a danger to yourself, to themselves, or to society that's not an immediate risk, law enforcement hands are tied. You can talk to any sheriff in the state. I was in Lawrence County yesterday talking to the sheriff. They know individuals who are a danger to society, but based on the law that we have and how tightly it is written, it doesn't pertain to those individuals. And so, yes, Senator Jack Johnson was correct yesterday. We need to be very cautious and not open it too wide. But we also knew going up to special session on the House, and I applaud for Senator Jackson for talking to law enforcement and DAs and judges as he's preparing for January. And I think they will come to the same conclusion that we did prior to special session. And getting this language correct, we think we have the solution, and being able to have a policy that's not too wide, that's too general, but that would fit this category for this individual.
So,
as well.
Cameron, am I confused that the district attorney, the Metro Nashville Davidson District Attorney Glenn Funk, did not have the opportunity to appeal the decision by Judge Dalton? Am I confused by that? I thought he had an opportunity to appeal and he chose not to.
I have no idea on that aspect.
Well, I asked you the question if you believe Glenn Funk did everything in his power in order to stop these individuals from being released. You said he did. I'm telling you that he didn't. So maybe you're learning something from me today. I don't know.
I've had many conversations with him about this case and about other cases and about things that he's doing and things that need help, which align with other generals. Whether or not he had the right to appeal, to hold them in, I don't know. Once the person could have bailed out, the judge could have made the decision. I think that would be a conversation for him. What I do know is he's trying to put violent criminals, career criminals, and individuals in jail to protect society. I do know that's what he's doing. The details of it and exploring every single opportunity, that's a question for him.
Fair enough. Okay, Cameron, I don't know how long Cameron has. Ask Cameron if he's got a couple of additional minutes. I know we have to take a break. Completely unrelated to the conversation that's going on is a conversation that Cameron Smith and I are about to have about DCS. And I would love to get an opportunity to ask the Speaker of the House, Cameron Sexton, about this whistleblower. Actually, what I'm going to do is step aside and let you, Cameron, ask Cameron Sexton about the whistleblower that's now come forward with some new information. We'll do that next on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. A good conversation with the two Camerons. Cameron Smith of the Tennessean, our good friend and our weekly guest at this hour on this day. We also have Cameron Sexton on the hotline. And Cameron, I appreciate you spending some time with us to talk about a few other matters outside of the special session and what we can possibly expect out of the general. And I'm going to let Cameron Smith pose this question involving DCS and see where you are on it. Cameron?
Sure. So my family is a therapeutic foster family. Over the last couple years, we've really engage DCS and kind of what's going on and trying to understand how we can help a lot of these kids. And you are well aware of the comptroller's report that came out that highlighted some of the issues, systemic issues in DCS. We got a commissioner that's focused on some of these issues. And then, the challenge is these issues were very deep. They were very, very problematic. And then we get a whistleblower report that says, wait a minute, we've kind of declared victory, but there's some real questions here. And the allegation's pretty serious that the commissioner and other senior leadership folks said, well, we don't want a record of what's really happening here because, we don't want the media to get their hands on it. To which I respond, man, if that's true, that's a big problem because we're worried about projecting victory here as opposed to taking care of these kids who are in really vulnerable positions. And I wanted to know, I get it. These kids aren't a constituency that gets a lot of attention, but is this something that the House can take a look at and say, hey, what's really happening here? What's the case and how can we help get results for these kids? Because if there are unsafe, unsanitary conditions, I know this is really difficult to deal with, but the answer can't be let's modify reports so it looks better than it really is. Am I missing something there?
No, I mean, you're right. I mean, from what I understand, and we're still trying to figure out, the factuality behind it and making sure that we know everything that went on.
Sure, absolutely.
But our initial understanding is that there was an employee over there who filed some reports, and they were asked to change the reports. Is my understanding.
Yeah.
And to soften the blow to what you said, your point is not to point out all the inefficiencies or the issues that were going on and portray it to be something different, which goes against everything that government should be or anything
right.
that the Republicans think. You need to have transparency. The only way to fix something is to know what you need to fix. And you can't do that if you're constantly not providing the information to the General Assembly or to the public or to your employees on what needs to be done to fix it. And so it's astounding, if that holds true and that holds the water. I know that we're going to take a hard look into it and start asking questions. I know yesterday, the Finance Committee, it's a different topic. They were asking some hard questions, Department of Education on some things, and
sure.
They're going to call them back in. And so our job is to make sure that when you find these things that we're not having wool pulled over our eyes and making us think that everything is okay. So I think I know we're going to take it very serious, and we're going to take a look into it and really see what's going on. And it really makes us want to dig deeper because we put a lot of money into DCS, and we've increased salaries because they weren't being paid. And so if this is still ongoing, then we've got to have a change and understand, is it a bureaucracy thing? Is it a leadership thing? Is it an administrator thing? Where's the breakdown? Is it everything? We have to have a better understanding of what's really going on.
Yeah, well, I love hearing that you're going to conduct oversight and there's going to be some accountability there because I think there has been some progress made, but there was a lot that needed to happen here. And the moment that a commissioner or any other senior official decides, if indeed those facts prove true, to modify a report to avoid the reality. The reality is what drives the change, right? People need to know that. And if they're trying to hide that, they don't need to be in those positions any longer. And I don't know a better way of putting that. That's the accountability mechanism here because obfuscation in government, Republicans can't stand for that. Democrats can't. That can't be a thing we do. And these kids are absolutely at stake. And I think the issue, and I'll put a fine point on it for your consideration, is DCS has an issue because so many of the issues touch minors in the sense that they impact minors. And so there's a need for privacy, right? Because we don't want minors in these vulnerable positions, things disclosed about them. I totally understand that. But DCS has mistaken this for agency privacy, meaning the agency doesn't have to be transparent. The agency doesn't have to, be real clear about what's going on. And that must change. Like that absolutely has to change. And is that something that you can commit to holding them accountable for, being honest about what's actually happened, even as we make progress?
No, we'll hold them accountable. We want to dig in and make sure we know everything that's right and not right. And sometimes the story is exactly what's reported. Sometimes it changes. And so we're going to take our look at it, just like that. We want to talk to the Department of Corrections about how much Narcan is being used in our state prisons.
Sure.
Not so much because of Narcan, but because if Narcan is being used, then drugs are being shipped in. And so how is that happening? And so it's those kind of things that we constantly are trying to ask questions and get there and get that information. The rape kits is one thing that came to light. We worked with TBI, but what's being reported in the rape kits, it's moved from 42 weeks to 18 weeks. It's a lot better. We got to get it. We got to close that window even further, but it's a start. And so, the thing is when there's issues that pop up as a General Assembly, our job is to have oversight over the bureaucracy and make sure that they're performing to the level that they need to be performing for the state of Tennessee. And that's the job that we take seriously.
Well, I appreciate it.
Cameron, thank you for your time. Thank you for the explanation with regard to the special session and what you expect out of the General Assembly and the conversation about DCS. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, take care. There's Cameron Sexton joining us for the better part of the hour. I'm glad that he has agreed. I mean, it's obvious.
Big deal.
That the House of Representatives the General Assembly more broadly is the oversight body when it comes to DCS. And if these types of things are happening, we need to get to the bottom of it. It feels to me, and you've done a lot more research than I have, that DCS oftentimes is far more concerned with covering their own behinds than they are getting kids the help that they need.
It's classic bureaucracy, right?
That's right.
It's, well, we got to make sure it looks good. And this should be kids first all the time.
Whether it is good or not seems to be a secondary consideration to whether they look good.
Right. If I got kids in a house that don't have food and they're hanging out on the roof of a large building, we might want to address that before we worry about image. And I think, and that's one of the things that I'm going to work on with a lot of my writing is focus on how can we bring some of these things to light that are just weird and wrong and strange. I've got one coming out about custody and juvenile justice proceedings coming probably this weekend or next that it's going to shock some folks about some of the policies that are there that nobody talks about.
And just to finish up on the conversation regarding the special session, it's my understanding, and I'm being told by sources that I trust, and I wish I'd seen this prior to Cameron leaving. I would have asked him about it, that he says that 7036, which is the bill that he references that potentially had the ability to keep Shaquille Taylor in jail. Well, as written, it wouldn't have had that ability. But he says, well, we had some discussions about amendatory language. But he says that it got through committee and to the House floor. So I know that I'm nerding out a little bit when I mention this, but it was brought to my attention that you don't amend bills on the House floor. You have to send them back to committee. So 7036, if the information I'm getting is correct, would have had to gone back to committee. Now, maybe
You're saying it's not ready for prime time.
It wasn't ready. It wasn't going to be ready. And the bottom line is, and look, I get it. At least I think I get where Cameron's coming from. But they didn't pass the House. It didn't pass the House, and yet he's pointing fingers at the Senate saying, well, we didn't bother to continue down that road because the Senate made it really, really clear that they were getting out of there. All right, that's all well and good. But last Friday, you were pointing a finger squarely at the Republican supermajority in the Tennessee Senate. And now it feels like it's got a little squishy.
Well, we need to stop punching each other in the face. Like, we need to work together. It's fine in a political race or something like that, but these are elected officials. They're in office. Guys, work together, have a cohesive agenda, and roll.
Well, and the fact of the matter is there are plenty of judges in the state of Tennessee, and once again, I know I'm nerding out here, but on this 7036, the change between immediate and imminent, there are plenty of judges in this state that have determined that immediate and imminent are interchangeable terms.
The difference is not what they're saying it is.
Right. And so Cameron's hanging on that change in the language and saying that D.A. Funk couldn't have done anything. He could have appealed the decision on the part of Judge Dalton, and he chose not to. So, I mean, just to finish that conversation up.